use a 10mm wrench to go ahead and loosen and remove the terminal here for the battery. Let's go ahead and loosen that up. Using a 12mm gear wrench, we're going to go ahead and loosen this nut right here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this adjuster bolt right here. I'm going to use a 12mm socket and ratchet and loosen our lower bolt on the power steering pump. With that bolt loose, we should be able to pivot our power steering pump. And we'll remove our belt from the pump itself. With the belt off, we're going to go ahead and try and remove our bolts here to get the pump up and out. Now at this point, with that belt off, we're now going to go ahead and get that bolt out as far as we can. And just a nut on that one there. We're going to go ahead and remove the adjuster by continuing to remove that bolt we had loosened earlier. Remove the nut off of that there. Now we're going to remove this bolt here, holding the adjuster bracket in place. I'm just removing our adjuster bracket and bolt right here. Set that aside. Now our whole pump is loose. What we have to do now is take the pump and our reservoir out together. There was a connecting hose that goes from the pump to the reservoir, and then the reservoir has another line that goes towards the back. Now we're going to pull this up, we're going to set it aside. It is full of power steering fluid, so you want to make sure that any of the fluid does not leak out and get onto the paint of the vehicle. I'm going to grab our reservoir, pull it up out of its bracket. Hopefully we can get this out together. And bring this up. Go ahead and set that aside. And we have a big cloth on the side here. Using a 14mm socket and ratchet, we're going to go ahead and loosen the upper pivot bolt on our alternator. Using our 10mm socket, we're going to go ahead and loosen our belt bolt here. go ahead and remove this upper pivot bolt. So our alternator seems to be stuck in place, both on the pivot point and our adjuster down below, so we can't get our belt off yet. I'm gonna go ahead and use a pry bar and try and work our alternator free. Let's go ahead and slide our belt off here. All right, with that belt off, we should be able to get a little more play in here to work this out. I'm going to use our 12mm gear wrench, and we're going to loosen this lower adjuster as well, or pivot bolt. Okay, go ahead and remove that bolt. Go ahead and grab your alternator and work that up and out. Going through the wheel well, you're going to use your trim tool here, pop off the 2 buttons holding the skirt here in place. Pop this one off here, the one behind it, and open this up. We're going to use a jack and a small block of wood, and we're going to jack up just until we can put a little bit of support on that oil pan. We're not going to lift the car, just want to support that while we remove the motor mount. Using our 17mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove this, and this one here. Take our upper mount, lift this bracket right off here, set that aside. We're going to use your flathead screwdriver. Going to undo our cover locks here and lift up on the top. Get that cover up and out of the way, set that aside. Now we're going to go ahead and remove all the nuts off the top here, all 10mm. Remove your ignition coils. Press on the little tabs, pull the harness off. I'm going to pull up on our alternator power cord right here. I'm going to disconnect these two connectors, pinch the tab, work that up. Same thing on the EGR, press down on the upper tab, work that off. I'm going to use a small pick on the back side over here, just going to work it in and release this clip. Grab the whole harness, flip that back. Okay, to remove your ignition coils, we're going to use our little pry tool here to go ahead and get underneath and work those coils up. I'm going to go ahead and remove our vacuum tube right here. Remove our dipstick, pull that off. Just give it a quick wipe, set this aside. Remove our harness off the back side here. Push that back. We're going to remove our 10mm valve cover bolts here. I'm going to go ahead and remove our oil cap here. And remove our 10mm bolt in the back here. Use a 10mm socket, remove the AC line bracket here. Grab your valve cover, work this up. Good, remove your valve cover gasket. We're going to remove the two 10mm bolts holding the top of the cam gear cover on here. In the front part of our upper cam gear cover, there's a rubber boot here. Go ahead and pop that off. There's a harness inside. I'm going to press down on the little spring clip on there. Trying to remove the connector off the top of that sensor. Go ahead and remove that connector off of that. In order for us to effectively get to the timing cover bolts and hardware that we need to remove, we're going to loosen the bolts holding the ABS module in place here. I'm going to remove this 10mm bolt right here. Now the other 10mm bolt for the bracket for the ABS module is right here. We're going to use our gear wrench. And on the back side here, on the strut tower here, I'm going to remove this 10mm bolt. Now this just allows for a little bit of room for us to manipulate this unit around. Okay, get that bolt out. Using a 19mm socket, go ahead and remove the lug nuts. Now, if your vehicle is equipped with a hubcap like ours is, go ahead and remove the hubcap, set that aside. Grab the wheel, take that off, set that aside. Using a 19mm socket, we're going to head and loosen and remove the harmonic balancer bolt. Now we can go ahead and remove our hex key, and we'll remove that harmonic balancer bolt. Once we get that harmonic balancer off, you want to pay attention to this little key right here. We're going to pull this out. And it's a little metal square block, and it actually goes into the notch right on the harmonic balancer, and it locks it into the crankshaft on the bottom. Make sure you don't lose this key. You want to keep that with the crankshaft because you will be required to put this back in. So what we found on the bottom of the engine here is one of our main causes of an oil leak. This is the lower crank seal. When we pulled off the harmonic balancer, we had seen that the plastic was shaved off of our timing cover itself, and we're going to use our pick and pull this out. And this appears to be possibly melted plastic with a little bit of rubber from the seal itself. And we have a bunch of oil leaking out, running down the oil pan. Let's remove our lower timing belt cover. There's 4 bolts. It's a 10mm here, here, right here, and there's one up inside here. On the side of the timing cover, there is the crank sensor harness that's pressed into a little notch on the side. You want to pull that harness out. We're going to remove these 2 bolts right here using a 14mm socket. Okay, once you get it so far, you should be able to spin that out by hand. And get that upper bolt. Now on the front side of this bracket, there are 2 more 14mm bolts. Let's go loosen and remove those. You can also reach these from the top, but while we're on the bottom removing the other 2, we'll take these out. There's another bolt right in the back here that is actually just in front of the exhaust manifold. We're going to get that from the top. You use our 14mm deep socket. Get to that bolt right in front of that manifold. And loosen and remove that. Remove your crank sensor by disconnecting the harness here. Press this tab in, disconnect it. Use a 10mm socket in your ratchet. Remove this bolt. Once that bolt is out, go ahead and remove the sensor. Now what we're going to do is reinstall our crankshaft bolt. And once that bolt is in there, I want to have you pay attention to the crank pulley here. And we're going to use as a pick. Now if your gear has multiple marks on it, what you want to do is I'm going to use a pick and go over the marks. And this one here actually has a notch in the pulley. So this is a groove or a notch in it. This is your mark that you want to pay attention to. We're going to go ahead and crank the pulley, rotating the assembly. And you want this mark to line up with the mark up top here, which is roughly about 1 o'clock. And when this is up in position, we're going to go up top and check the cam gear and make sure that the cam gear is lined up where that needs to be. Once we line up our lower crank sprocket or gear, you want to make sure that the upper cam gear is lined up. You can use a pick and locate your notches. There's going to be a little notch right here. There's one directly on the opposite side. And you want to make sure that the sprocket itself is facing upward at noon or 12 o'clock. For the painted marker on your sprocket here. Make sure that this notch here is at 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 12 o'clock. Using your number 6 Allen wrench, we're going to go ahead and remove the tension off of our tensioner here and slide the belt off. There's 2 ways you can do it. One, put it on the back side here and rotate this, or put it right in the cam gear right here, get the same results. Gonna go ahead and slide our belt off here. Go ahead and work your timing belt off. Go ahead and remove that. Use a 14mm socket, remove the bolt holding the tensioner here. There we go. I'll go ahead and loosen that. Now there is a spring on the upper left-hand side of this tensioner that is assisting as the tensioner. We're going to remove that with the tensioner itself, or the pulley. There's a spring in the back here. I'm just going to work that off of the pin. Use your Phillips head screwdriver and remove this screw right here. Going to use our trim tool remover and pop the buttons out here. And just remove these for across the whole front. I'm going to go ahead and pull it down, just let it hang. Now with your catch can underneath, just go ahead and open up the petcock here. We're going to drain the system. Going to install our petcock here. And then we'll give this a wipe down and clean it up. Now on the top here, there's a little wiring harness junction. There's a little plastic clip right here. We're just going to use a pry tool to release that clip and then work this junction unit off of the bracket right here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the 4 10mm bolts holding the water pump. There's one here, here, in the lower right, and then there's one up in the top over here. Now in doing so, there will still be antifreeze in the engine block, so prepare to have a catch can or some rags or a bucket underneath, and this is going to run down the front of the engine. So I'll loosen these slowly and be prepared for that fluid. Right. Once the bolts start to come out, you'll be able to grab them by hand and spin them out. I'm going to start with our upper bolts first, and then loosen the lower ones a little bit and let that coolant drip out. I'm just going to loosen the 2 lower bolts just a little bit. I'm going to roll our catch can underneath. All right, with these bolts loosened, go ahead and separate that. All
I'm gonna go ahead and spin out one of our other bolts here. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses when doing this. And work that water pump just a little bit more. Let's go ahead and remove this last bolt. 2 fingers removing the bolt and the other finger is holding the water pump in place. Go ahead and remove this bolt here. And then we'll slowly separate the water pump. And pull that down and out.
On the back of our water pump, we're going to go ahead and install our gasket. Just press in those little tabs right here that will actually hold that gasket in place. Just pinch that around, make sure that it's set in all the way. And those tabs will keep that gasket from falling off. Now what we're going to do is match up the bolts to the other original water pump. Now you want to pay attention to the 4 bolts securing the water pump. There's going to be 1 short bolt out of the 4. There's a long bolt on the upper left, long bolt upper right, short bolt lower left, long bolt lower right. So you want to put it on like this. Make sure that short bolt is on that lower left.
Let's go ahead and feed our water pump into place. Now we did already clean the engine block where this is going to be mated to. Line this up. I'm going to get our lower bolt in here. We're going to go ahead and thread this in as far as we can.
Now let's go ahead and install our lower left bolt. And then we'll finish up with those 2 upper bolts. And then we'll go ahead and snug those down. Now normally what you want to do is go ahead and torque these bolts to 8.5 foot-pounds and do this in a crisscross pattern. I'm going to snug these down.
shortcut. And then take our tensioner with the spring and the bolt. Let's feed this up and in. Get that bolt started. I want to go ahead and get that spring installed on the spring pin right here. Let's go ahead and snug down our tensioner pulley bolt. Once it's seated and gets snug, just give it a little bit more.
Let's go ahead and lower our timing belt down into place. Feed that down around the water pump. Gonna line this up, put it down around our crank gear.
So we're lining up the belt. What we're going to do is we're going to slide our crank gear off here. We're going to go ahead and route the belt around our water pump. Feed the belt up over our cam gear. Let's go ahead and work the belt over the tensioner here. And line this up over this. I'm going to try and line up our belt here. I'm going to go ahead and try and then line this up here. Now you can see that we can't get our belt on all the way. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and release the spring on our tensioner. And this should allow us a little bit more
Freedom there to move our belt.
Let's go ahead and use our spring tool here. I'm going to loosen our bolt here on our pulley. It's going to give us the freedom we need to get this belt lined up. Okay, once we have the crankshaft gear on, we want to make sure that our notch here still lines up with our arrow right on the back. And then we'll confirm that the cam up top, all those lines match up. And then we'll go ahead and snug everything up here and release the pin for our tensioner. Using my pick, this is the notch in our crank gear, and it lines up with the arrow on the back side. All right, on the top, I'm going to confirm that the pulley itself has our little marker mark here on our cam cap. We have the side mark here at 9 o'clock. That lines up with our side notch right here at 9 o'clock. And then we have our other notch over here at 3 o'clock. So it looks like everything is lined up. Now we have the belt on. I want to go ahead and reattach our tensioner spring here. We have our spring on there. Let's go ahead and tighten down our tensioner bolt to 7 foot-pounds. Now, if you have the ability to do so, go ahead and get your torque wrench in there. Now that we have everything lined up, let's go ahead and grab our pin here. We have everything lined up and we're good. I'm going to install our bracket here. There's 3 bolts on the side. It's going to be 2 long bolts on the top, and then the shorter bolt of the 3 goes in the bottom. Let's go ahead and get this lined up. I'll try and get one of these front bolts in. Get this started. Get the shorter bolt on the bottom here, thread it in. We'll go ahead and install our 3rd bolt. This is a tough one to get to. It's right in front of the exhaust manifold. And get that started a few threads, and let's go ahead and snug those down a little bit. Right. I'm not going to bottom those out until we get the other 2 installed on the front side over here. We're going to take our crank sensor right here and line that up, fit that into place. We're going to install our 10mm bolt, and we're going to snug that down. Just snug that. Then we'll take our connector, line that up, work that onto the back, and it should clip into place. So what we're going to do is install our crank bolt. We're going to thread that down as far as we can, and we're going to manually rotate the engine. The reason why I want to do this before we put on all of our timing covers is we're going to check and confirm that our timing did not skip a tooth on the belt or the gears.
So what we're gonna do is, everything is lined up so far. This looks good here, looks good up top. We're gonna use our socket extension. You can use a breaker bar, but we're gonna go ahead and just use our ratchet. I'm gonna go ahead and crank this. It's going nice and smooth. I haven't had any resistance as far as valves hitting or anything like that. We're going to go ahead and line up our mark again up top. This should be lined up with our arrow up there. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the top, confirm that our marks are where they should be. Now that we've done the manual rotation of the engine, we can confirm that our marks line up on the cam and our side mark that we had initially put on to begin with. So let's go ahead and put our covers on. Now that we've confirmed our rotation and timing setup, let's go ahead and remove the crank bolt. Let's go ahead and take our lower timing cover to work that up in a position. And then once we have this up in a position, I'm going to go ahead and install our upper left bolt here. Once we get this threaded in, we'll go ahead and get the other 3 bolts started, and then we'll snug them down. I'm gonna get our lower right bolt on. All right, let's go ahead and just snug these down gently. It's just a plastic cover, so you just want it to be snug. Snug all 4 of these down. I'm going to go ahead and feed our bracket in here. Feed this up and around. I'm going to get our upper bolt started on the front of the motor first. Once we get the upper bolt started on this side, I'm going to try and get the 2 front bolts in. I'm going to go ahead and install our lower bolt in this bracket. Okay, and we have both bolts set in there. I'm going to go ahead and get the other 2 front bolts installed. Our shorter of the 3 bolts goes on the bottom. And then our other bolt here is the hidden one up in front of the exhaust manifold. With all three of those started, we're going to go ahead and snug those down. With those 3 bolts snugged up in the front, these bolts here will line right up. Just going to thread them in as far as you can by hand. All right, going to go ahead and snug these down. All right, we're going to snug this one up. I'm going to go back and just double check the other one here. Okay. I'm going to come back to the 3 front bolts here with our ratchet. I'm going to snug these down. Now we do have a 5th bolt on the top of the timing cover. It's right here, it needs to go in. So I'm going to go ahead and install the bolt right in that upper portion. And go ahead and snug this cover down. Now on our upper timing cover, we have a bolt hole here. We have a bolt hole here and one on the end. All right. The bottom one here goes through this cover as well as the lower cover. So let's go ahead and drop this down into place. Lower it down, push that in. Let's go ahead and get our bolt started. Now once we have all 3 of these started by hand, we'll go ahead and get those snugged down. All right, these are plastic covers, so just snug them down. Now we did go ahead and clean the cylinder head around the perimeter, make sure that there was no residual gasket or any oil on the spots that our gasket is going to be seated. Take your valve cover, feed that down and in. Lower this down into place. Let's go ahead and get our valve cover bolts set in. Have the 3 short bolts up front. And 2 long bolts in the back, and we'll get those all started by hand. Let's go ahead and snug these down. Let's go ahead and torque the cover bolts to 7.2 foot-pounds. I'm going to bring our harness up here. Bring this down and over. Grab your cables, line up the brackets. I'm going to install the nuts for these here. Let's go ahead and snug those down. Once that's bottomed out, just snug it a little bit. On the back bracket right here, we're going to install our bolt. Try and get that bolt started by hand first. Once that's caught, we'll go ahead and snug that down. Install our harness bracket bolts here. Let's go ahead and snug those down. Once it bottoms out, just snug that gently. And do the same on this side here. We're going to install our ignition coils. Go ahead and connect our electrical connectors here. Now that those are clicked on, let's go ahead and put our 10mm nuts back on and secure the coils in place. There's only so far you can tighten these nuts down before it just stops, so just snug those. Install your oil fill cap. Connect our temperature sensor harness right here, and then our EGR. Go ahead and install your oil dipstick. On the back side here, let's go ahead and install our 10mm bolts. And cut and take our bent hose here. Let's install our bolts for the ABS module brackets. Get that installed a few threads. Let's go ahead and get this bolt started in here. Now we're not going to bottom that out yet because we still have a third bolt to install. Now the third bolt goes down on this bracket. So we'll go ahead and tighten this bolt down, and then we'll go back and tighten up the other two bolts. install our cam sensor connector. And just work your way around the perimeter, pop that in. Now, using our floor jack, we're able to lower the motor down a little bit. Go ahead and get this mount set like that. Let's go ahead and jack this up. I'm gonna go ahead and just pull the motor over a little bit. I'm just going to work the jack back and forth until that can pop on. Let's go ahead and get the nuts installed. Once these are on, we'll go ahead and snug them down. Let's go ahead and torque these down to 40 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and lower our jack. And go ahead and roll that aside. It's going to install our cover right here. It's going to install our AC bracket bolt right here. Get it started by hand and snug it down. Let's go ahead and lower our alternator down into place. Bring our alternator up, line that up, put our bolt in. Go ahead, and while we have the adjustability here, I want to go ahead and connect our connector, our electrical connector on the front of the alternator. Line that up, push that on, and then we will get the battery cable lined up and install that onto the alternator. Once we get that on, as we're sliding that on, this upper bracket slides on, or this upper harness presses onto a bracket on the alternator. So we're going to install the harness and this bracket. Once we have the wire on there. Didn't pull up on that alternator. Get that little nut installed. Now that we have the nut on there, let's go ahead and get that tightened down. All right, I'll go ahead and snug that down. Take that rubber boot, pop that rubber boot over that.
So at the bottom of the alternator, we have our bracket right here. Let's go ahead and line up our adjuster bracket. Get a bolt started. You can go ahead and tighten that down. Let's go ahead and reinstall our harness right here. Just presses onto this tab and pops on to the water pump. And I'm going to take our harness here and we're going to pop this into the timing cover, just like that. Now installing your alternator belt, go ahead and line it up, put on the AC, and we'll go ahead and squeeze that onto our crank or harmonic balancer. Now in order to tighten up the belt, here is your adjuster bolt right here. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten the horizontal bolt, and once we have the proper tension on the belt, we'll go ahead and secure this lower bolt right here.
Now in tightening this here, you want to grab the belt in the middle between two pulleys, and you want to have about maybe about a 1/4 inch of movement. It's actually a little too tight. Okay. When tensioning your belt, you want to go between the two pulleys right in the middle, and you want to have roughly about a 1/4 inch of play up and down. And that's what we have. Let's go ahead and tighten up our bolt here. Go ahead and tighten up our upper pivot bolt here. Snug that down. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring our power steering pump over. We have our horizontal bolt here. Let's remove the nut off of that. All right, we're going to install our lower bolt down. Install the bolt in the adjuster slot down below. And feed that through the bottom eyelet of the power steering pump. I'm going to get and install the nut on the front side of it and just get it started a few threads. Install our pivot bolt here. And get the nut started on the back side here. Get it started a few threads. And then for the upper mount, we're going to install our little bolt up top here. At this point, we can go ahead and snug this bolt down right here. Let's go ahead and tighten down this nut a little bit more. This is our pivot bolt or slide bolt here. Now we don't want to make it too tight because we want to make sure that this can still move up and down freely. Now go ahead and install your belt. Feed this down. I'm going to get it around your power steering pump. And come down through the wheel well area. Feed that onto your crank. Let's go ahead and tighten this bolt right here. That'll bring the power steering pump up, tightening the belt. Go ahead and tighten this up. You want to have about 1/4 of an inch of play in the middle of the belt. Push down and pull up. Once you feel that you have the right tension, let's go ahead and tighten down this nut here and our lower nut and bolt. All right, snug that down. We're going to double check our belt tension. And it is a little bit tighter than what we want. Let's go ahead and loosen this. We're going to repeat our tightening process. We're going to loosen the belt a little bit. Perfect. Let's go ahead and tighten up that lower bolt. We're using our gear wrench in this spot due to the clearance or a lack of clearance we have. I'll go ahead and snug that down. So once it bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. There we go. You want to take your reservoir, slide that up and place that into your bracket. Push it down into place. You want to make sure that your hoses are popped into their retainers in the back here. Just press those down into place. And install our splash shield. Get that to line up with the bumper. Get your clips pressed in.
this up, push that screw through the splash shield, and then do the fender liner.
You want to go ahead and remove your radiator cap. Let's go ahead and fill this unit. And use the manufacturer specified coolant. Normally wants to be a 50-50 mix. I'm going to go ahead and start filling our system. I'm going to go ahead and open up our expansion tank cap and just set that aside. This is going to be an alternate spot that we're going to go ahead and fill our system with. I'm going to go ahead and put our funnel there. I'm going to go ahead and fill up the expansion tank to the full line, which is roughly about the middle of the expansion tank. So we've had the car running for about a half hour now, and the thermostat has opened up. Our reservoir tank here has a little bit of water left in it, so what we're going to do is go ahead and cap this off. Remove our unit here. And we'll install our radiator cap. At this point here, with everything warmed up, you won't be opening this here when the engine is hot and the vehicle's been running for a while. You want to go ahead and watch the expansion tank, check the fluid level there, then it'll be safe to open this up and fill accordingly if you need it. Let's go ahead and install our wheel. Now, if your vehicle is equipped with a hubcap like ours, you want to find the notch right here on the hubcap, locate the valve stem on the wheel, line this up, and we'll go ahead and get our lug nuts installed. Now let's go ahead and snug these down. Let's go ahead and torque your lug nuts down to 80 foot-pounds. Go ahead and grab your ground cable here. Let's go ahead and tighten that down.